So maybe you've heard of a little PS2 era game called Dark Cloud. Maybe like me, you discovered it on a demo disc that came with your PlayStation 2. I genuinely think this is a fantastic game. It was incredibly ambitious for its time, and it feels like it was made with a lot of love and passion. It's quite unique, blending an action RPG with city building in a way very few games have attempted since. But here's the thing, am I just speaking through rose-tinted glasses? Is it just pure nostalgia? Well, we're gonna find out. We'll explore the gameplay loops, rank the playable characters, see how the combat holds up, dive into the story a bit, and get deep into the village building that makes Dark Cloud so special. Returning to Dark Cloud in 2026, yeah, I'll admit the combat is showing its age, it's rough around the edges, and feels stiff by modern standards. But what keeps it engaging are the systems surrounding the combat, elemental affinities, weapon customization, survival and resource management, and even the procedurally generated dungeons make the experience far deeper than the combat alone would suggest. We'll dig into each of these elements later, but together, they create the kind of juicy RPG experience I've always loved, packed with little systems to experiment with and master. Thing is, Dark Cloud really comes into its own with its core gameplay loop. As you explore and progress different dungeons, you'll collect these spheres known as Atla. Between dungeon runs, the game returns you to these empty stretches of land to gradually build a village using the Atla you've collected. Homes, shops, windmills, trees, bridges. Every Atla you discover underground helps bring the world to life above it. This is exactly what makes Dark Cloud so satisfying, so fun to play. It's the way its core systems loop into each other. You delve into dungeons to recover Atla and resources. Then, by rebuilding the village, you unlock new residents, shops, equipment, and rewards that make you stronger. Before long, you're heading back into those dungeons, stronger and ready to push even deeper than before. It's a gameplay loop where systems feed into each other. It consistently feels rewarding because you're not just leveling up, you're seeing this village slowly come to life because of your efforts. For me, that tangible sense of progress is addictive as heck, and honestly, it's a big part of why Dark Cloud still holds up so well today. Before we get into more Dark Cloud, quick pause. If you love RPGs, consider subscribing to Bytes or giving the video a like. I'm a bit of an indie game developer who covers RPGs, and I'm replaying the whole Final Fantasy series while ranking them. Thank you. Okay, we've been looking at systems and structure, but Dark Cloud actually has a pretty simple setup. Okay, real quick intro. This dark genie awakens and wipes out villagers across the world, sealing both the towns and their people inside magical spheres called Atla. You play as Tone, gifted the Atlamelia by the Fairy King, giving him the power to recover those Atla and rebuild the world piece by piece. Along the way, you're joined by a group of heroes, each one from a different village, lost to the Dark Genie. Early on, we also bump into this guy, Cedar, a mysterious figure who explains that rebuilding the villagers alone won't be enough. The Dark Genie will just return and destroy everything again. So, our ultimate goal is to put an end to him once and for all. And as we'll discover later, Cedar is going to play a much bigger role in the story than you might expect. It's been really fun to revisit Dark Cloud. God, the soundtrack has been great, with some really strong atmospheric moments, like just taking in the ambience of Queen's underwater shipwreck dungeon. The music has really stood the test of time. Every location has its own distinct identity, and the soundtrack does a fantastic job of setting the mood. But more than that, hearing and remembering these tracks again brought the nostalgia flooding back. It took me right back to discovering Dark Cloud for the first time on a PlayStation 2 demo disc, and reminded me why this game left such a strong impression in the first place. It's not just the gameplay loop with the ambitious village building mechanics that make Dark Cloud memorable alone. The atmosphere and soundtrack ties everything together. Whether you're wandering through a quiet, cozy village or exploring an eerie dungeon, there's a consistent sense of charm that keeps pulling you back into this world. So each dungeon corresponds to a different destroyed village across the world of Dark Cloud, and this is where dungeons start to get interesting because each one has its own distinct theme and atmosphere, from Wise Owl Forest to Moonsea and everything in between. I really liked how different each dungeon felt from the others. They all had their own thematic identity, but if I had to pick a weakest link, it would probably be the Sun and Moon Temple. Personally, I found it a little bland. The repeating textures and patterns felt a little generic compared to other areas. Every now and then, I found special items that let me access optional backrooms. These are tougher versions of normal floors with better rewards, creating a nice risk-reward option. I felt these were well worth exploring, especially if you're lucky enough to find the key for that dungeon's backrooms. And I've got to say, it's pretty awesome just collecting the atmospheres in dungeons. You never quite know what you're going to get inside. It could be a tree, a person, or an entirely new building to place in your village. It's kind of exciting opening out there and kind of addictive. I kept finding myself saying, just one more floor, I just want a few more pieces for the village before bed, and before I knew it, I lost another couple of hours to Dark Cloud like it was the PS2 days again. There's also these little cinematic set pieces, quick time events where you fight mini bosses. I'm generally not a huge fan of QTEs, so I mostly found myself wishing I could just sit back and watch the cinematics instead, because they're actually pretty sick. Eventually, you'll also hit progression walls, where you can't go further until you recruit new party members tied to specific villages, which leads into what the game calls limited zones, which add extra rules or restrictions to certain dungeon floors. The big one being a floor is locked to a specific party member. And yeah, I found this to be a little frustrating when you haven't played them much and they've fallen behind a bit. But it's also kind of cool that it forces you to engage with a full roster of characters, otherwise I would never even try some of these guys. With Tone, you're wielding swords and daggers, so you don't have much reach on your attacks, which can add to that slightly clunky feeling in combat. As a trade-off, you get access to a pretty sick charged attack. While I do think the combat is stiff and very much a product of its time, there's still an element of mastery to it in learning how to use the movesets and working within the limits of the animations that exist here. And since every character plays so differently, I thought it'd be fun to rank them. This is completely subjective, based purely on who I enjoyed playing the most. Starting at number 5 is Ungaga, a spear-wielding warrior from Muskalaka whose fiancée was sealed away by the Dark Genie. What's cool about him is that he can tornado spin his spear and basically turn himself into a human blender. Next is Goro, the hunter from Matayaki village. After losing his father, he chose to live alone in the forest. His isolation is why he survived the Dark Genie's attack. He's painfully slow, but his enormous hammer absolutely demolishes everything it comes into contact with. I found myself swapping to Goro whenever enemies burrowed underground because he could deal with them far more reliably than anyone else. My third favourite has to be Xiao, a stray cat transformed into a cat girl by a magic potion. She feels like she was pulled straight out of an anime. She fights with a slingshot, and I found her great for safely chipping away at enemies from a distance. Second place would have to go to Osmond, bit of an attitude, lives on the moon, and is a machine gun wielding engineer. So we've got swords, spears, slingshots, and then this badass from the moon with a machine gun, and it totally works. It feels surprisingly slick flying around with his hover pack gunning enemies down. But my favourite has always been Ruby, a troublemaker and a genie from a magic lamp. She doesn't like that the Dark Genie is giving other genies a bad reputation. Her attacks are just so satisfying to use, you can charge her magic blasts for extra damage, and she's also essential for opening locked doors by activating elemental crystals. It's a weird and wonderful cast and a big part of Dark Cloud's charm. I love that every character has their own origin and reason for joining the journey. They don't necessarily get huge character arcs or dramatic developments after their introduction, but in a way I think that simplicity adds to the game's old school charm. They're still memorable because of their designs, personalities, and the way they play. Towards the end of every dungeon there's a boss fight, and everyone gets a chance to shine. Xiao has to shoot down Duran from the sky, Goro has to crush Master U-Turn's toes, and Ruby has to break the Ice Queen's magic barrier. That said, while the ideas behind these fights are cool, the actual boss battles can feel a little awkward. A lot of that comes down to the game's clunky combat, which makes some encounters feel more frustrating than they probably should. Next, I want to talk about what I think is Dark Cloud's most fascinating element, and arguably its biggest selling point: village building. So you can literally place down homes, shops, trees, rivers and roads and design your own village in each location. Mechanically, I'm just placing everything onto a giant grid piece by piece, but there's something surprisingly addictive about slowly watching these empty spaces come back to life. And as I progressed, I eventually made my way to the moon, where instead of building a village, I'm constructing a giant mech piece by piece, which I'll use to battle the Dark Genie. Sick as hell, but more on that later. There's something really satisfying about taking the time to actually explore the villages you've designed. I found loads of useful treasures hidden around, not just consumables, but special items that permanently improve my stats, my thirst meter and my inventory size. Speaking to the people in your village is another part I really enjoy and added to the immersion. They'll reward you personally while also giving you a window into their lives. You'll learn what they're missing and also their preferences. Do they like being near water? Who should their neighbours be? And so on. What's cool, if you manage to fulfill everyone's requirements and reach 100% happiness, you'll even unlock bonus rewards in each village. A nice little incentive for completionists. And I think this is where Dark Cloud's village building really stands out. In most games, towns feel like locations created by developers for you to visit. But in Dark Cloud, they feel like your villages. You know where the shops are because you placed them there. You know who lives next to who because you decided it. These aren't just set locations on a map, they're places you spent hours rebuilding, and that personal connection is something quite unique to Dark Cloud. It's a feeling that very few games have managed to recreate. As you're exploring these dungeon floors in search of Atla, you're not just battling enemies, you're also managing a set of resource mechanics that each add another layer of pressure and some decision making to your runs. Your health is restored through food, but there's also a thirst meter to keep an eye on. The deeper you go, the more it drains, and once it runs dry, you start taking damage over time. You'll occasionally find wells scattered throughout dungeons which give you a quick refill, but most of the time you're carrying water with you, and that comes at a cost because inventory space is painfully tight. But in my experience, the most frustrating resource to manage was weapon durability. This is where things start to get a bit punishing. Every swing, every shot, every hit you land wears your weapon down. That's where repair powder comes in, but if durability hits 0, that weapon breaks and is deleted from existence. And I've accidentally lost weapons I've spent hours building up, which feels really bad. That's an understatement. This was kind of a soul-crushing moment. I'd rather load an earlier save and lose loads of progress rather than lose my main weapon. What makes it tricky is that durability loss isn't consistent. Different enemies melt your weapons at different rates. A massive golem or a dragon will shred your durability far faster than weaker enemies, and when you're mid-combo, it's easy to accidentally push a weapon past the point of no return. Take it from me. Eventually you do get access to auto repair powder, a consumable that automatically saves a weapon from breaking. I'd usually carry a few, but they're expensive to maintain, especially early on, and your inventory itself is a resource that you'll need to manage. I can stock up in the village, but do I bring more healing items, repair powder, more food and water, or leave space for loot? There's decisions to be made. Which all feeds directly into weapon customization, a surprisingly clever system. You find or buy different jewels and gems, then slot them into your weapons to boost their stats. As you defeat enemies, your weapons gain experience, and once that little bar fills up, it levels up. But get this, I think this is the most interesting part. When a weapon levels up, it absorbs the gems you've attached. So you're constantly feeding your favourite weapons more gems, gradually making them stronger and stronger over the course of the game. I think it's a really cool system. My only nitpick is that it's a little too easy to make a costly mistake. Break a weapon you've been building for hours and all that investment disappears. It makes weapon durability feel even more punishing. But at the same time, it's also what makes your weapons feel meaningful. Just like your villages, these are things you've become attached to. You've personally invested time into these. Overall, I quite enjoyed revisiting the story. Like I mentioned earlier, you travel across all these different locations around the world, each with their own small story arc. Eventually, in the Sun and Moon Temple, you discover an airship that lets you reach the moon. Even all these years later, there's something really nostalgic and chill about exploring the Moonsea dungeon. Then, using the Atla you recover there, you gradually build a giant mech that you'll pilot in a battle against the Dark Genie. It was such a cool surprise and a really creative twist on the village building mechanic. Instead of the usual building up a village, you're assembling this massive sun giant that becomes a key story element you'll use to save the world. It's a pretty spectacular set piece, and it all leads into the story's final dungeon, the Gallery of Time, where the Dark Genie awaits in his true form. and I want to talk about the finale and ending just a little bit because it genuinely hit me quite hard. We learned about Seda's backstory. He was a king in another land, but tragedy struck when his fiancée Sophia was murdered by an assassin targeting him. Consumed by grief and hatred, Seda's despair eventually led to the creation of the Dark Genie. The only way to stop the Dark Genie for good is to expend the Atla Melia's remaining power and rewrite history itself. Tone uses its power to bring Sophia back, undoing the tragedy that set these events in motion. The world is saved, but because history has been rewritten, everything you did is effectively erased. The villages were never destroyed, the people were never trapped inside Atla. Tone simply returns home with Xiao back in her original cat form. It's a genuinely bittersweet ending. You save the world, but the memories and experiences that shape Tone's journey are gone. It reminded me a little of the ending of the original Final Fantasy, where history is also rewritten and the hero's deeds are forgotten. And all this made me wonder, would Dark Cloud work today in the games industry in 2026? I think it absolutely could. Maybe a bit of a visual overhaul, smooth out the combat a little, tiny bit of quality of life improvements, and finally give these characters full voice acting. After all, this was an early PS2 game, before voice acting had really become the standard. But the most important thing is preserving what made Dark Cloud special. It's this constant loop between exploring dungeons, recovering resources, and using what you've collected to rebuild your villages. Then as your villages grow, you unlock new equipment, shops, and upgrades that help you delve even deeper into those dungeons. At its core, this is still an incredibly ambitious idea, an action RPG where you're not just saving the world, you're rebuilding it piece by piece. And even today, very few games have captured that same feeling of progression and personal attachment. More than anything though, I think that's why I've enjoyed revisiting it so much. There's something incredibly satisfying about sitting back in a village that you designed yourself, knowing every house, every bridge, every tree was something you gradually restored piece by piece. Dark Cloud isn't perfect. The combat is dated, some systems can be frustrating, and there are definitely rough edges from its era, but underneath all of that is one of the most creative and memorable gameplay loops that PS2 era had to offer. So no, I don't think this is just nostalgia speaking. Dark Cloud still has something special. It was ambitious, it was weird in a good way, it was completely unique, and most importantly, it made a world that felt like it belonged to you. It feels like a game designed by talented people who weren't afraid to throw every cool idea they had into a single game. An action RPG, village building, resource management, and even building a giant robot on the moon. Somehow, all these different pieces come together to create something that feels genuinely special. Like I said, it feels like a game made with a lot of love and passion. Alright, next I'll be talking about Final Fantasy VII Remake. In the meanwhile, check out my return to Dragon Age 2, I found a new appreciation for it. All my favourite summon across every Final Fantasy. Have a good one.